Seagulls screech. Ominous music rises. Fog dissipates. A steamboat appears on the distant horizon as a foghorn seemingly warns the faint at heart. These are the opening sights and sounds of Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse, and this is Open and Close, a series where I explore the opening and closing scenes of a given film to study how the filmmakers bring us into the story, and ultimately, what they leave us with. While the beginning and ending are the focal points, everything is on the table. There will be spoilers, so please see The Lighthouse for yourself before watching this video. And so it begins. As the vessel, a lighthouse tender, draws closer, we cut to a shot of its prow, plowing through the frigid sea, a chain clanking with each wave. Then we're on deck. The passengers have their backs to us. They sway back and forth. We're over their shoulders now. In between them and out of the fog, it appears, almost all at once. We see the light, we see the house, we see the island. The foghorn wails. I consider The Lighthouse to be a stone-cold masterwork of filmmaking. I find it impeccably taut from top to bottom. Honestly, its craftsmanship leaves me in awe, and the culmination of its choices in just these first 4 shots are demonstrative of, well, every single shot that follows. This synergy of sight and sound, the way it plays with what we can see, what we cannot see, and what we will soon see. Similarly, we hear things before we see them. The sound element is a marriage of the sound design, effects, and composer Mark Corvin's original score. They feel interwoven to a degree that it creates its own soundscape. By engulfing the viewer with its cacophony of sensory data, we can almost taste the sea salt of this momentous arrival. This opening is as strong a barometer as you're likely to find. It's reading, in a word, brooding. Without any words, The Lighthouse tells us that what follows will not be pleasant. Once ashore, the musical score has dissolved amongst the elements. The passengers, now heavy laden with luggage, make their arduous trek in. Like displaced hermit crabs, they shuffle across the top of the frame. It's with this shot here that I'll speak to what gives The Lighthouse its distinctive look. Shooting on black and white 35mm negative with vintage lenses and a custom filter, making the film resemble something closer to 100 years ago than anything contemporary. Even the aspect ratio squeezes more than the 4:3 we've seen making its art house comeback of late. Here, it's closer to square at 1.19 by 1, a dimension Eggers cited is ideal for scaling the verticality of a lighthouse. As you can see, this shot captures the changing of the guard, as it were. The newly arrived pair relieve another, the previous lighthouse keepers. Their watch has ended. They pass each other like two ships in the night. Nary a word is exchanged. At last, we glimpse our characters' faces, and what faces they are, what stories they tell. Thus far, the filmmaking truly speaks for itself, but the screenplay, penned by director Robert Eggers and his younger brother Max, is a work of art unto itself. The opening and closing scenes of The Lighthouse are dialogue-free, and yet the dialogue is one of my favorite parts of their film. And so let's take a moment to appreciate the writing you don't hear in the film, in how the characters played by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are described on the page, and how that's been transcribed on screen. The new wickies stand utterly still next to each other, their gazes fixed on the same distant spot. One man is young, early 30s, tall, athletic, but starved. His deep-set eyes are haunted, and his left eye is healing from a weak gold shiner. His crooked expression is severe. There's an eerie disquiet about him. He's like a dog that's been beaten and caged too many times. A small mustache shows his vanity. The other is old, haggard 60, spry 70. He's weathered, feral-bearded, and hunched, with hands like vices. His lack of visible lips suggests some missing teeth. He tremors a bit, but he's lean and sturdy as a lead pipe. His high cheekbones smile even when he grimaces. His wild eyes shine like jewels. He's an old pan, a satyr. Both of them seem like the kind of man you might find muttering to himself in the corner of an empty barroom with a distant look in his eye. Terrific stuff, right? This shot is held long enough for us to assess the men we'll be stuck with for the rest of the film. When the foghorn bellows louder than ever, we see how it rattles the young man. Conversely, the old man cannot be bothered. After he exits frame left, we remain with the young man, who is staring dead ahead. He looks like he's trying to put on a brave front in the face of something daunting. We see what he sees, a shot that mirrors the very first, as the steamboat disappears back behind a curtain of fog. Within 3 minutes of screen time, our characters have arrived on Pilot Rock and are left all alone. Well, with the seagulls to keep them company. Before we dissect the insanity on display at the end of the film, we best trace the steps the characters take to get there and scrape off some meaning along the way. Now, one does not simply summarize the Lighthouse, but I'll give it a go. The younger Wickie, who we come to know as Ephraim Winslow, is new to this particular trade. He formerly worked as a timberman on Hudson Bay. Now he labors under the supervision of the older, Thomas Wake, whose metaphorical wick is all but burned out. At night, Winslow spies on Wake, who appears to worship and find all manner of gratification at the altar of the lighthouse, in the lantern room, where Winslow is never allowed. This forbidden fruit grows increasingly tantalizing to the young man, who is haunted by his past and whose sexual frustrations are exercised via mermaid scrimshaw. To scrub more salt into his wounds, his efforts are mocked by a one-eyed seagull. And despite Wake's warnings,
I seen you sparring with a gull. Best leave him be. Bad luck to kill a seabird.
Winslow eventually snaps. Changing their winds of fortune. All the while, the plot thickens further with a pair of revelations. We learn what happened to Wake's previous apprentice.
Died. Went mad, he did. Raving about sirens, merfolk, bad omens and the like. He believed that there was some enchantment in the light.
And later we learn that Winslow isn't Winslow. His real name is Thomas Howard. Ephraim Winslow was his foreman back in Hudson Bay. Howard let him die in an accident and then stole his identity. Thus, he is increasingly tormented by his guilt. As the storm sets in, so does their cabin fever. The wickies are fueled by alcohol, and when that runs dry, they resort to turpentine, and their relationship becomes all the more turbulent. One moment they are at each other's throats, the next they are in each other's arms. Madness overtakes them until it turns deadly. At its core, the Lighthouse explores the covetous relationship between master and apprentice, the wisdom and status of the old, the health and beauty of the young. I shined a light on cinematic verticality when analyzing the social hierarchy on display in Bong Joon-ho's Parasite. Similarly, the titular Lighthouse encapsulates the power dynamic of its keepers. As Howard toils away in the bowels of the structure, Wake basks in its alluring glow. Wake's exclusive access to the lantern room shows that he has the upper hand. What starts off simply enough as a master-apprentice dynamic eventually becomes something of a negative Oedipus complex. When describing the Lighthouse, Eggers was fond of saying,
"Nothing good happens to two men trapped in a giant phallus."
Indeed, the phallic imagery is there, even on the page. During Howard's masturbatory fever dream, it turns, quote, looking like a penis. Thus, the film is both a slow burn of mania and homoeroticism. What starts with Wake taunting Howard,
What wrong such a one as ye to this damned rock?
Such as what?
Pretty as a picture. Only Jocelyn, lad.
evolves to something physical, with a slow dance that almost ends with a kiss. The film's climax becomes extremely bodily, to a point that could teeter into either death or consummation. Theirs is a love-hate relationship, a would-be dominant submissive relationship, but neither is keen to submit. What happens when you have two such wickies but only one lighthouse? One will come out on top. Wake lords his seniority over Howard at every possible turn. In an early scene, Wake continually demeans Howard by calling him a dog.
I mopped and swept twice over.
Ye lying dog.
I already says...
How dare ye contradict me, you dog? Swab, dog. Swab.
The same insult with which Howard's former foreman derided him.
You shouted up and I just stood there. Tom, you dog.
This comes back to bite Wake once the tables have turned.
Back, I said, back! Back, Maddie!
There's a good boy. There's a good boy.
Look who's on top now. After burying and then killing Wake, in that order, Howard at last scales the spiral staircase to the lantern room, and the light opens itself unto him. He stares into it, he reaches into it, he loses himself in it. What does Howard see in the light? Eggers is far too shrewd a filmmaker to show us. Besides, watching what it does to Howard is far more effective. As a plot device, the light is something of a MacGuffin, but not free from interpretive symbolism. Is the light power? Is the light knowledge? Is the light sexual satisfaction? What more could a man want?
Salvation, said he.
Perhaps the light is merely what our superiors possess, whether to keep from us or look down on us. In a dream sequence, Howard scales the lighthouse catwalk, coming across what looks like the body of his former boss. But it's him. Wake grabs Howard from behind, his eyes shine down on him like the lighthouse, an image paying homage to one of the rather homoerotic paintings of Sasha Schneider. But when Howard finally sees the light, he is neither able to contain it nor himself. He falls down the lighthouse, and the last shot of the film shows us his demise. This was foreordained. When Howard buries Wake alive,
What protean forms swim up from men's minds and melt in hot Promethean plunder. Scorching eyes with divine shames and horror. Things true. You'll be punished.
Here he references Prometheus, a Titan deity in Greek mythology. He created humankind from clay, but he defied the gods, even Zeus himself, by stealing fire and gifting it to man. As punishment, Zeus chained Prometheus, setting him on the rocks in Caucasus, whereupon he sent an eagle to feast upon his liver, which grew back each day, only to be devoured again and again and again. Many a painter have depicted Prometheus's fate, but I especially like the gory scene that Salvatore Rosa put to canvas, which seems echoed in the disemboweled display at the end of the lighthouse. Thomas's eyes have been pecked out, his body bloodied and decorated in gull guano. Prometheus was punished for an act of overreaching, overstepping one's bounds, and so Thomas Howard, blighted before he even stepped foot on Pilot Rock, meets a similar end. In a single shot that pulls ever backward, we are treated to the chorus of seagulls. The same screeching with which the film began. Noticeably absent is the score, because nothing need be foreshadowed anymore. This folksy psychological horror film comes to a close, almost as if a tableau, dissolving in a hazy seaside mist. And so we'll cut to black on this installment of Open and Close. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the opening and closing scenes of The Lighthouse and the themes it explores. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you down there. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Subscribe to Cineflect for more Open and Close, and click that bell next to the subscribe button if you'd like to be notified anytime I upload a new video. For Cineflect, I'm J.S. Lewis. Until next time, watch something good.